Assalamu alaikum everyone. With the new episode of the Leaders Lounge, I am Hesham and I hope you all are doing well. Today I am here to talk. We're going to talk with Maya, same Maya, to discuss my topic of today. So today's my topic of discussion with Maya is cool, from eyes to attitude, how the world evolved. So today I will discuss this with Maya, and I will learn about it many things. So let's get started. First of all, hello Maya, how are you?
Walaikum wassalam. Hello, Hisham. I'm doing wonderfully. Thank you for asking. That's quite a topic you've chosen, from eyes to attitude, how the world works. Sounds ambitious and fascinating. Where should we begin?
Maya,
Start with
I have questions from beginning to end. So we will begin to first section, section one. So in the first section, my first question of my whole interview is that what role did the Ice Age play in shaping early human civilizations? I think it's a good start.
that is a good start. The Ice Age, or more accurately, the series of glacial periods during the Pleistocene epoch, fundamentally shaped early human civilization. A single event, more like a long challenges and opportunities. Essentially, forced early humans to adapt. Forces became scarcer and more localized. This led to things like migration patterns, following game animals, seeking warmer climates, and more sophisticated hunting techniques. It also spurred cooperation and social organization because winters required working together. The glacial cycles actually created a lot of the landscapes we see today. The formation of rivers, lakes, and fertile valleys was often a direct result of glacial activity. And those resources, they were key to the development of agriculture later. It wasn't just about hardship, it was about laying the groundwork for everything that followed. Does that give you a good starting point? Would you like me to elaborate on any specific aspect of that, or on to the next question?
No, no, Maya, I don't want to discuss any specific thing in it, but we have to move on next question. And thank you so much for explaining it in a very better light. It's a really good start. So, Maya, now can you tell me that how did ancient humans survive and adopt to cold climate? Like it was very difficult for them, but how?
You're right. It absolutely was difficult. They didn't have central heating, obviously. A lot of it came down to ingenuity and really understanding their environment. First, shelter was key. King caves, rock overhangs, and eventually constructed shelters using things like mammoth bones, hides, and vegetation. Layering was huge. Animal hides for warmth, and clever construction to block wind. Then there's fire. Mastering fire wasn't just about warmth, it was about cooking food, which made it more digestible and provided more calories and also protection from. It was a total game changer. Diet also shifted. Howie. They focused on high fat foods, think meat from large mammals, to provide the energy they needed to stay warm. Culturally, it meant a lot of knowledge was passed down through generations: how to track animals, what plants were edible, how to build effective shelters. It was a collective effort, right? And we shouldn't forget things like social bonding. Huddling together for warmth wasn't just practical, it was
Hmm, okay, that's nice.
important for morale, too. It was a brutal existence, but they were incredibly resourceful. Glad you think so. Anything about that you'd like to explore in more detail?
Huh.
Are you ready for the next
Yeah,
question?
Maya, I have
Just let me
much
know when you're ready to
questions.
move on.
I'm
I'm
ready.
happy to take things at your
Maya,
pace.
I am ready.
Ah,
So my
got
next question is that can you explain how glacier periods influenced migration and settlement patterns?
absolutely. Okay, so glacial glacial periods acted as these huge push and pull factors for human populations. As glaciers advanced, they made vast areas uninhabitable, pushing people southward or towards refugia, areas that remained ice-free. Think of it like squeezing a balloon. You displace everything. This forced migration wasn't random, though. People tended to follow game animals, mammoths, bison, reindeer, that were also moving to find food. So, migration routes were often dictated by animal migrations. When glaciers retreated, they left behind newly exposed land, often rich in resources. This led to new settlement patterns.
Hmm.
People would move back into these areas, establishing settlements near rivers and lakes created by glacial meltwater. These areas were ideal for hunting, fishing, and eventually agriculture. The shape of the landscape itself, the valleys, the coastlines, heavily influenced where people chose to settle. Basically, glacial periods created a dynamic landscape that constantly reshaped human settlement patterns. Does that make sense? It's like the Ice Age didn't just change the climate, it
Yeah.
changed, and people had to react to that. Good. So we proceed to the next question then?
Yes, Maya, we will proceed to next question, but before it, I am agreed to your question that climate change is a really big issue, and it was changing the world, and the people had to face it and to respond to it. So you are right. So my next question is that what scientific methods help us study ancient ice and climate history?
That's the really important point to bring up, Hisham, connecting the past to the present like that. It's good to recognize the parallels. And you're right, climate change is a huge deal. Okay, so to study ancient ice and climate history, scientists use a few really clever methods. One of the biggest is ice core drilling. They literally drill deep into glaciers and ice sheets, extracting long cylinders of ice.
Yes.
These ice cores are like time capsules. As snow falls and compresses into ice, it traps tiny bubbles of air and particles from the atmosphere at that time. Scientists can analyze the composition of these air bubbles to determine past levels of greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide and methane. They also look at the isotopes of oxygen and hydrogen within the ice itself, which can tell them about past temperatures.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for telling us and bringing more knowledge to us. So, my can tell me that uh, what was the role of ice in preserving ancient species and artifacts?
That's a fantastic question. Ice has been an incredible preserver. Essentially, when an organism or artifact gets frozen quickly and stays frozen, it slows down or even stops the processes of decay. Think of it like hitting pause on decomposition. In places like Siberia and the Arctic, paleontologists have discovered incredibly well preserved woolly mammoths, even with fur and stomach contents intact. And it's not just animals. Ice has also preserved ancient human remains, tools, and clothing, giving us a unique window into the past. The Otzi the Iceman found in the Alps is a prime example. He was remarkably well preserved, and scientists were able to learn a ton about his life, diet, and health. It's honestly pretty amazing what can survive for thousands of years locked in the ice. It's a bit like nature's own freezer.
Hmm. Okay, that's nice. Thank you so much for explaining it, Maya. So, and now can you tell us that how is the concept of cooling advanced in science?
That's a fascinating question and a little complex. Are you asking about how the size of animals changed during glacial and interglacial periods? So, colder versus warmer times? Okay, good. So, generally speaking, larger body sizes were favored during glacial periods. This is due to something called Bergmann's rule. It basically states that within a species, individuals living in colder climates tend to be larger than those in warmer climates. It's a matter of surface area to volume ratio. A larger body has less surface area relative to its volume, which means it loses heat more slowly. So larger animals were better able to conserve heat during the Ice Age. Conversely, during warmer interglacial periods, smaller body sizes were often favored because they dissipated heat more easily. There's also something called evolutionary constraints. It takes time to significantly change a species' size, so these shifts aren't instantaneous. And it's not a perfect rule, there are exceptions, but generally that's the trend. Does that make sense?
Yes, my head. That makes sense. Thank you so much for explaining it. So I now can tell us that what are some major inventions related to cooling in human history.
Ah, great question. Humans have been trying to tackle heat for a long time. Okay, so starting way back, simple things like clothing made from animal hides were a huge first step, providing shade with structures like tents or lean-tos. That's ancient technology. So let's jump forward a bit. The ancient Persians were masters of evaporative cooling. They developed wind catchers, tall structures that captured breezes and channeled them down into buildings. Clever stuff. Then you have the Romans, who used aqueducts to bring cool water into their cities for fountains and to cool buildings. A bit later, in China, people were using fans in ice houses, storing ice harvested in the winter to use for cooling in the summer. Then you get into more modern inventions, things like mechanical refrigeration in the 19th century, and of course, air conditioning in the 20th. And just to throw in something a little different, early forms of refrigeration were even explored with things like using salt to lower the freezing point of water. It's been a long process of innovation.
Yes, man, you're right. It is a long process of innovation. So when I can tell us that what did the word cool start being used as a slang term?
Ah, that's a fun one. The history of cool as slang is surprisingly recent. Really, really took off in the 1940s, specifically within the jazz scene. Black American jazz musicians used cool to describe a particular style of jazz, one that was relaxed, understated, and emotionally restrained. It was the opposite of the more frantic, energetic style of bebop. Think Miles Davis's Birth of the Cool album. From there, it started spreading into wider youth culture in the 1950s, becoming associated with rebellion. It was about being stylish and not conforming to expectations. It's kind of amazing how a musical term became such a pervasive part of our everyday language, right? It's really interesting to trace it back to that specific cultural moment in community. There's a lot packed into that little word.
Okay, that's nice.
Does that answer your question, or were you
Yes, man, it
glad you
was
think so?
great.
Are you ready to move on to wonderful? What's the next section focus on?
My next question is that how did jazz musician of the 1940s redefine cool?
Okay, so you want me to elaborate on how jazz musicians redefined cool in the 1940s? Absolutely. It wasn't just about the music itself, though that was central. It was about a whole aesthetic, a way of being. For these musicians, figures like Miles Davis, Lester Young, and Charlie Parker, though they each approached it differently, cool represented a rejection of the energy, emotionally raw style of bebop, which had dominated jazz in the early 40s. Bebop was about virtuosity and pushing boundaries, very expressive, even aggressive. Cool jazz, on the other hand, emphasized restraint, subtlety, and a more melodic approach. It was less about showing off technical skill and more about creating a relaxed atmospheric sound. The musicians also adopted a certain attitude, a detached, almost aloof demeanor that became part of the cool image. It was anti-establishment, individualistic, and a bit mysterious. They were crafting a new identity, both musically and personally. Essentially, they took a musical term and imbued it with a whole set of cultural meanings.
Okay, that's
Does
nice.
that capture what you're...
Yes, Maya, that was
Excellent.
my
Then
answer. So Maya now can tell us that can coolness be measured or is it is entirely subjective?
Your next question is, how did the concept of cool spread from jazz music to mainstream American culture?
No, my question was that can coolness be measured or is it entirely subjective?
Ooh, that's a really good question. It gets at the heart of what cool actually is. It's complicated because I think it's both subjective and, well, not measurable in a scientific sense, but definitely perceptible. A lot of it boils down to social perception. What one group considers cool, another might find unremarkable or even uncool. There are elements of it that are cultural, and those shift over time. Think about fashion. What was considered cool in the 1950s is very different from what's considered cool today. However, there are also patterns that emerge. People tend to associate cool with qualities like authenticity, confidence, nonconformity, and a certain effortless style. Neurologically, there's some research to suggest that seeing someone who embodies these qualities activates reward centers in the brain. So, while we can't put a number on coolness, we can observe its effects on people and behaviors. So, it's largely subjective, but it's not random. There are underlying psychological and social factors at play. What do you think?
Yes, Maya, I think you are totally right. And my next question is really important. Like, what are the iconic fashions, movement that define coolness?
Okay, this is where it gets fun. Defining coolness through its iconic expressions. Let's break that down. Semiotics, as you know, is the study of signs and symbols. So, when we look at what signals cool, we see a constellation of things. Iconic fashions, think James Dean in a white t shirt and jeans, Marlon Brando in a leather jacket, Audrey Hepburn in a little black dress. These aren't just clothes, they represent rebellion, individuality, and a certain effortless style. Movements like the Beat Generation in the 50s, with its emphasis on nonconformity, poetry, and jazz, were hugely influential. Then you have subcultures like mods and rockers in the 60s, each with its own distinct style and attitude. In the 70s, punk rock challenged mainstream conventions with its DIY aesthetic and anti establishment lyrics. Hip hop in the 80s and 90s brought a new wave of coolness with its emphasis on street style music and self expression. These aren't just isolated trends, there's a common thread running through them: a rejection of the mainstream, a celebration of individuality, and a desire to define one's own identity, and often a bit of an edge. It's about standing out while simultaneously appearing nonchalant. Does that resonate with your thinking?
Yes, yes, Maya, it was resonant my thinking. Thank you so much for telling us and improving our knowledge. So, Maya, can you tell me that how, like, what kind of personality traits are considered as like a cool?
You're very welcome. I'm glad I could help. Okay, personality traits associated with coolness. It's a really interesting question. And well, my it's not about being the loudest or most attention seeking, that's for sure. Generally, a cool person is perceived as being authentic. They're comfortable being themselves and not trying to be someone they're not. Confidence is key, but it's not arrogance, and it's more of a quiet self assurance. They also tend to be independent and nonconformist. They don't blindly follow trends, and they're not afraid to go against the grain. A sense of humor is huge. Being able to laugh at yourself and not take things too seriously. And there's a certain level of emotional restraint. It's not about being cold or unfeeling, but about not being overly expressive or dramatic. They're observers, listeners. They're more likely to ask questions than to dominate the conversation. And crucially, they're generally respectful of others, even if they don't agree with them. They're approachable, but not desperate for approval. It's a subtle blend of qualities, really. Do you want me to elaborate on any of those traits in particular?
No, no, Maya, I don't want to go in deep of it. So, Maya, can you tell us that what role does AI play in deciding what's trending or cool today?
Oh, good question. The media, absolutely. It's a massive influencer. Social media, especially Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, really dictate trends, often at a lightning fast pace. Celebrities and influencers have enormous power to shape what's considered cool, and their endorsements can make or break a trend. Advertising plays a role too, of course, associating products with a particular cool aesthetic. Fashion designers and stylists are also key players. They're constantly pushing boundaries and setting new trends. But it's not just top down influence. Subcultures and niche communities still have a big impact. Trends often start underground and then trickle up to mainstream culture. To, and increasingly, consumers themselves have more power to influence what's cool by creating their own content and sharing their own style online. It's a really complex ecosystem of influence, a constant interplay between creators, consumers, and the media. It's a lot less about someone deciding what's cool and more about something collectively emerging and being amplified by these various forces. Would you like me to dive a little deeper into any of those aspects?
No, Maya, I don't want to go in deep because I have much less time and I have much question. So, Maya, now can you tell me that how is cooling the planet now a literal necessity?
You're absolutely right to bring that up. It's shifted from a slang term to a crucial, literal necessity. Cooling the planet now refers to geoengineering and mitigation strategies aimed at reducing global warming. The Earth is warming at an alarming rate, and even if we stopped all emissions today, we'd still see continued warming for decades due to greenhouse gases already in the atmosphere. That's where things like carbon capture and storage come in. Technologies designed to remove CO2 from the atmosphere. There's also research into solar radiation management, attempting to reflect sunlight back into space. And, crucially, efforts to restore ecosystems like forests and wetlands, which naturally absorb carbon dioxide. The urgency is driven by the increasingly severe consequences of climate change, extreme weather events, rising sea levels, disruptions to agriculture, and threats to biodiversity. It's not just about protecting the environment anymore, it's about protecting human civilization. It's no longer a matter of stylistic preference, it's a matter of survival. It's kind of ironic, isn't it? That something we once used to describe a state of ease is now a desperate need for the planet.
Yes, Maya, you're right. It's a very big need for a planet. So, Maya, can you tell us about that? How does what a role does personal responsibility play in coal sustainability?
That's a really important point, Hesham, because technology and policy changes are vital, but they aren't enough without individual action. Personal responsibility plays a huge role. It's about making conscious choices in our daily lives that reduce our environment. Things like reducing our consumption, choosing sustainable products, conserving energy and water, and adopting a more plant based diet. It's about reducing our carbon footprint, but it's also about changing our mindset, recognizing that we're all interconnected and that our actions have consequences. It's not about individual perfection, but about collective effort. Each small change adds up. And importantly, it's about advocating for change, supporting businesses and policies that prioritize sustainability, holding companies accountable for their environmental impact, voting for leaders who are committed to climate action. It's about using our voices to create a more sustainable future. It's a bottom up approach alongside top down regulation. It's about recognizing that We all this. Does that feel right to you? Shall we move on to the final question? We're getting through them quickly.
Yes, Maya, we have to move because my interview time is completed, almost completed. So thank you so much, Maya, again for giving your precious time. I really enjoyed the conversation and I learned many things from you. So thank you so much for all it and giving your precious time. So this is our today's my interview with Maya. I hope you all enjoyed the conversation. So see you in our next interview with Maya. Till then, Allah Hafiz. In the end, as always,